Behavioural science has shown us that a core tenet of human motivation is autonomy, a sense of being in control and having a choice. Whilst the recent COVID mandates do come with good intent, they can be perceived as taking away people's autonomy, thereby creating feelings of frustration right through to intense anger and resistance, as we've seen recently in Victoria and elsewhere. As we move towards a world where vaccinations are required in certain settings, how can policymakers guide behaviour change in a way that doesn't invoke a threat response? Are there better ways to nudge people in the right direction without the need for the parental do as you're told approach and the backlash that that can create?
Bruce, let's hear from you on this. Is it possible to nudge rather than order or tell people they have to be vaccinated?
Well, Dan, it's a really good question, and I'm big for autonomy. I think that teams are really interesting things. Like, I was sort of the daggy kid at school, and I wasn't great at sport, right? But I learnt a lot about teams, and when you get people together and you've got a goal and you know where you're going to, everyone's happy to run and get there. So leadership then really plays into that, and I think part of what Dan's question is how do we actually get us all running to the same goalpost? And at the moment, I think we've got such a disparate amount of information coming and going, and I think people are really confused. Jennifer used that term maybe before, and in business we can't have maybe. We have to be black and white, we have to have a goal, and we have to go exactly where we're running to. And so it's a problem, and it stems to leadership. So, I mean,
this opens the question around mandating or conditional vaccines, as I think Simon would prefer to call them. We know, Sally and Jennifer, you're kind of on the same page on this. Jennifer, just explain to us what your view is about where businesses or indeed sectors should be able to mandate a vaccine.
Well, let's go back to Simon's point, because he's absolutely right. We should not be using that term. We should be saying this is a condition of your employment, like there are many conditions. If you're working on a mining site, you have to test absolutely zero for alcohol. So, I think he's absolutely right. I think we should reframe this as about condition. And clearly, there are some sectors where the risks are so high, health in the example that we were just talking about, where there are essential services, where there is a risk of a system breakdown, where employers will have to require people as a condition of their employment to be vaccinated. And Sally and I have been arguing that that should ideally be done through public health orders and that they should be consistent. Now, the states haven't gone there, so that means that employers have to do that. The Fair Work Ombudsman has put out some pretty helpful guidance around that. That people should consult with their teams, that they should consult with the unions, and Qantas is a masterclass on this. They've done this extremely well. So there are going to be circumstances where the risks are so high, health, aged care, very high-risk industries, essential services, where people are going to have to say, look, as a condition of your work, you need to be vaccinated. But what Sally and I have been arguing for a long time is that the fundamental discussion that we need to be having is a positive agenda to get people vaccinated, making sure that we aren't painting people as pariahs, as Simon said, giving them a sense of, what are the advantages, giving them the right information and making it not a finger-wagging exercise, but what's the benefit to people? Our campaign, Get One Shot Closer, is all about getting one shot closer to your grandma, or getting one shot closer to your mates at work and getting one shot closer to your friends. It's not about saying you're doing something wrong. And I think that's turned a lot of people off. So Sally and I have been very much, we've got to run a positive campaign. Governments have rightly decided this is voluntary, but there are going to be some high-risk industries where it's a condition of employment in order to protect the safety of people and their teams and their customers and protect continuity of services. We're going to have to say people, as a condition of their employment, have to be vaccinated.
But Jennifer, in the absence of a state government public health order, some businesses are and plan to introduce these conditions of employment or a mandate, call it what you will, SPC, Qantas, Telstra. Are you saying they shouldn't be doing that?
No, I'm saying that they should be doing it. They have to do it because they have to be able to guarantee the safety of their workers and their customers.
But they don't have they don't have this public health order you're talking about.
No, but it would have been what we said, Sally and I, is it would have been better to do this through public health orders, consistent.
Is that what you're saying, Sally?
Well, those public health experts make it where they see it as a broader public health issue.
Telstra workers?
No, so in the case of healthcare, it's obviously about the workers, but it's also about the people they're caring for. for us, it's a safety issue. So it's a safety issue in the workplace. And so in the case of other workplaces where there's no public health order, you have to assess whether or not someone who chooses not to get vaccinated, it poses a greater risk to the other workers and also to themselves.
Exactly.
And if
so
they
in this example of, say, SPC,
Yeah.
what do you think? Should they be...
Well, first of all, I think they jumped the gun seriously, and it caused a lot of division, as the person was pointing out, in that workplace, and it has in a whole lot of the other workplaces where this has happened too. Despite, everything, Australia is on track to get one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, and that's because, we're all being positive about it, not divisive like it is in the US. So
you don't think these companies should be going it alone?
I don't. I think that they need to do a proper assessment. They need to talk to their workforce. If it is the case that there's really good reasons that there's no other way of keeping everyone safe, well, they might then say it's a condition of employment here, but there is a whole lot of other options too, like rapid tests, like masks, like all of those other things. If they can't do that, there is no other option. In the end, you do have, as someone says, a freedom of choice, of course, to get the vaccine, but if there's consequences for you not to choose, and if you choose not to, and there's a higher chance that you're going to make others sick, well, then everyone's got a right to safety.
So there are, however, some public health orders issued for healthcare workers in, I think, all states and territories. In Victoria, a public health order was issued for construction as well. Now, do you think that was the right thing to do or not?
Also in New South Wales and the LGAs, to leave those LGAs as well. It's a public health order, so it's not just in Victoria. In the case of that, those experts made that decision, as they say, around the fact that it's the only way to keep those workplaces safe at the moment. Now, those public health orders expire as well. They're not there forever. It may be in another couple of months it's no longer necessary, but in order...
If you want to work the next couple of months.
If you want to work the next couple of months, in order to keep those workplaces safe, they made that decision.
Was it the right decision, though? That's what I'm asking.
I think there should have been more consultation. I think there might have been ways that they could get other ways to make sure that you totally reduce the risk. But in a circumstance where you're saying only, 25% or 50% of people can come to the workplace anyway, we're in the middle of a terrible pandemic with really high numbers here in Melbourne, you've got to respect that they've made that decision to keep people safe.
So was it the right decision or not?
Well, I'm not the public health expert. You're asking me to I don't have the data or all of that. I respect their decision, and that it should be followed.
And what about the protests?
I
just want to follow this. What about the protests that followed? Because Sally McManus, you did say this was an attack on the union orchestrated by the far right. Do you now accept there were actually union members involved in that protest?
I always accepted that there was union members involved. There was construction workers there. It's more about why did we get to a point where people were so angry about this issue, and goes back to where we started. Like, when you mandate things, a lot of people will get their backs up and say, well, you're not telling me what to do.
So
like,
that
this
mandate
is unfair.
did fire up those protesters?
Yes, absolutely it did. But there was a whole lead up to this, like for months and months and months, where on social media and elsewhere, and let's face it, Craig Kelly, Clive Palmer, the Murdoch Press, Christensen are all saying that this is like an impingement on your freedom. And you could see it happening on social media every day where people were being told that. So by the time that mandate happened, people already had strong views about this. And so I think that was a volatile, conflict-based environment that should have been avoided. Having said that, that was stoked and fed by those very people, the far right and those anti-vaxxers.
Well, and those union members and other workers just were suckered into it, were they?
Well, you think about it, like the majority of construction workers and union members weren't at that protest.
No.
Like, there's most construction workers are getting vaccinated and are pretty upset that they're not working at the moment. Like, this
David,
is a small group of people.
Yeah, Jennifer.
I just think we've got to get this right back into the perspective that we're talking about. This is about keeping people safe.
Yeah.
This is about making sure that you're keeping your team safe, you're keeping your customers safe, and making sure that you are doing whatever you can to do that. And if companies and businesses, particularly in those high-risk areas, particularly in essential services like Telstra, high-risk industries like Qantas, if that's the only way that they can keep their people safe, then they ought to be able to say, as a condition of employment, you need to be vaccinated. And people have choices, of course, but we need to make sure that that the safety of people is paramount to this discussion.
And can I just say, I agree 100%, Jennifer, with what you're saying, but could it not be the case that if the national average is 80 or 90%, that then that is the average for business as well? Like, do we need a 100% mandate for construction, or can that industry, not being frontline healthcare worker, be 90%, and that business owner needs to reach that target to move forward?
But you've got to remember that's at this moment. At this moment, while there's a big outbreak in Melbourne, that is what's needed. It may not be what's needed when we get to 90%, which I reckon we really will. And it may not be, next year either. So, but at this moment, that's what's needed.
You can't apply those sorts of general statistics. I mean, there are some areas where small margins of error can have absolutely disastrous consequences.
Exactly. And everyone thinks there'll be the 10%.
The other thing I want to put on the table about this is I think part of the anger that you see in many parts of Australia is that ordinary people are really annoyed that they're held to strict account as to whether they wear the mask or whether they're vaccinated or a whole plethora of things. But they look at the people who are at the top of the tree, the people with the real power, and more generally, they're not accountable for anything that they do. I mean, Bruce was making this point, I think, a little bit earlier, and I just reckon that when it comes to things like, going back a bit, the sports rorts and any number of other areas, we are paying the price in part in the country now for the end of accountability and responsibility amongst our political leaders, which has really annoyed people. And I just think that we've got to also take stock, not just about the particular issues, but about the larger notion of our political culture and what impact it has when you reach a crisis like we have before us today.